So we are now in the second chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. And if you remember, we shared a little bit about Matthew's life. Originally, he's identified as Levi, and he was a tax collector and considered a sinner. Of course, we're all sinners, but that's how he was looked at. And of course, he was not liked very much by his own people, which were the Jews, because he collected taxes from them and didn't always do so in a way that was, in their eyes, fair. And so all tax collectors were like prostitutes. They were like drunkards and sinners and people who just couldn't be trusted and who were not part of God, is how they were deemed. They might be Jews, but they are outside of um, God. And so Jesus said to him, while he was doing his job, tax collecting, follow me. And the most remarkable thing, those few words, and we talked about it the last time we met, follow me, sunk so deeply into his heart that he realized that Jesus was somebody who was definitely part of God. And he knew his own condition. He was not part of God. And I don't know if there was a pause or not, but I do know that that hit him squarely in the heart. Wow, this man of God asked me to follow him. He didn't know what that meant. He saw the other disciples that were following with Jesus. He just said, you're asking me to be part of this. And he dropped everything and followed Jesus. And he followed him to a point where he was one of the 12 apostles. And this is his account of the good news, the gospel of Jesus. And we know we have four different accounts. This is Matthew's, the man who was nothing but a hated sinner by his own people, where it's called directly by God to follow him and just committed his life to do just that. And so now we're going to venture into the second chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. And it says that after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, that Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem. Keywords here are after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, which was another place. During that time uh, of King Herod. So he was the king of the Jews, as what the Jews considered. And that they arrived in Jerusalem asking, where is the one who has been born king of the Jews? Now, Herod's thinking, whoa, I am the king of the Jews. And yet, these magi from another region of the world traveled there and asked, where is the king of the Jews? We saw his star in the east, and we've come to worship him. Now, if you watch Hollywood in movies or read in books, you'll think that this was the very night that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. But clearly it says after Jesus was born in Bethlehem that they traveled. They traveled from the east. So they traveled for some time. And they came to worship Jesus, the King of the Jews. Well, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Whoa, what are these guys talking about? And when he had assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people, the scribes are Bible scholars, they know the scriptures inside and out, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. In Bethlehem in Judea. And we know that that did happen. And that's how they replied. For this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. Out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people, Israel. I think it's beautiful how this prophecy clearly stated that Jesus would be coming from the Jews, the Israelites, to be their shepherd of all those people. Those were God's chosen people, given a covenant that came down and started with Abraham, but then, of course, they went and had the law and the prophets that came through Moses. And now, from those prophets, we're seeing the prophecies are coming about. And that's why these magi who understood these things followed this star to worship who they believed was the King of the Jews, the one, the Messiah, the Savior of this world, who was to be born there. Well, then Herod called the Magi, and he called them secretly, and he learned from them the exact time that the star had appeared. So it wasn't just that day, it wasn't the day before. He realized that this was some time ago that they saw this star, and they traveled from a long way off, and he wanted to kind of get a time frame when it was. And sending them to Bethlehem, he said, go and search carefully for the child. Now, he didn't say the infant, he didn't say the baby, he said the child. And when you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him. You know, he had evil in his heart already. And the Magi wouldn't know any different because this is one of their own. This is an Israelite. That's how they deemed it. So after they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star that they had seen in the east went ahead of them, just as it had the whole travel that they did, until it stood over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with great delight. And on coming to the house, now note, it's not coming to a manger, it's not coming to a place where Jesus was just born. This was coming to a house where there was a child. They rejoiced with great delight. On coming to the house, they saw him, the child, and his mother Mary, and they fell down and they worshiped him. Now, I don't know if Joseph was around at this point, because we know that he's not mentioned much after the birth of Jesus. We do know that Joseph was around when Jesus was a young man because they were looking for him, but I don't know why he didn't come to the door. But Mary came and fell down. They fell down and they worshiped Jesus. So these magi traveled a long distance to find Jesus. They found him. They rejoiced and they're worshiping the Lord. Then they opened their treasures and they presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. This was a great honor, a great gift for them to bring and to freely give to this child who they were now worshiping. And having been warned now in a dream not to return to Herod, you see, God has a way of leading us where he wants us to go and keeping us from where he doesn't want us to go if we're obedient and we listen. And they were obedient. They were warned in a dream from the Lord not to return to Herod. They withdrew to their country by another route. So they went home. After they worshiped the child Jesus, they traveled back home. And when the Magi had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt. See, the Lord once again knew the evil that happens in this world, the forces in dark places, and warned Joseph, gather up your family and go to Egypt. Get up and go. Take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt. And then I want you to stay there until I tell you. because Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. God is a deliverer. And he right here shows us how he intervenes. So Joseph got up, he took Jesus and his Mary and went by night, and they withdrew to Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. So they stayed there for some time. And this fulfilled what the Lord had spoken through the prophet, out of Egypt I will call my son. Now, that prophecy could have never happened if it weren't for the circumstances that happened up to this point. But it was because of those circumstances that the prophecy comes true. And this is the way God shows how great he is, that his prophecies are always true prophecies. Well, when Herod saw that he had been outwitted by the Magi and actually had been outwitted by God, he was filled with rage. Sending orders, he put to death all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years and under. So now we know a time frame. The Magi said, we saw the star about 2 years ago. And we know that at this point, when they came, Herod wanted to make sure he got this child, so kill all those who were 2 years and younger. And they went out to kill them all. And so then it was spoken through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. Great, great death happened. You know, a massive movement by the supposed king of the Jews to wipe out who he was envious of, someone who Magi from a far off land came to worship. They didn't come to worship him. They came to worship some child, and he was going to rid the world of that child, which would cause him to not be confronted with the fact that he had an adversary. Well, after Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. He said, get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those seeking the child's life are now dead. Now, this shows you the real time of how the adversary works, because he's told in a dream he packs up and is heading back to Israel. But meanwhile, God is ready to intervene to protect his own. And it says, but when he learned that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in a place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And this was inside of him. He felt a fear and he said, no, this doesn't feel right. And then, having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophets. He will be called a Nazarene. And we know that Jesus then grew up in a Jewish household with brothers and sisters, mother and father, as long as Joseph was around. And we know that they were devoutly serving God. And we know that as Jesus grew until his age around 30, when he began his earthly ministry and was baptized in Jordan River by his cousin, John the Baptist, set out on ministry after he was tempted in the desert and visited where? His own area, the region and district of Galilee. And that's where the Lord began his work. So you see how God moves us where he wants us to be. We need to just trust in him. And when he says go, we go. And if he says stay, we stay. What better evidence was there in the life of Jesus? And you can see how the adversary was trying to end the life of Jesus right then and there. And yet, God's will will be done. Every single bit of God's will, every prophecy, every word, everything that's written in the revelation Jesus gave to John will come true. And this just bodes so greatly in showing how God does that, that we would have this account that Matthew was recounting and documenting for us to be able to look back on and see the mighty hand of God work and how he will work protecting us in the same way if we just have the faith to place in him and believe in him. So that concludes chapter 2 of our look into the Gospel of Matthew.